guys, I'm pleased to have with me, I guess, a new friend of mine, Mr. Blain Henshaw. Glad to have you with us, man.
Nice to be here.
Awesome. In my research for today's interview, I kind of came across a biography. And, you know, I couldn't put the words any better than what's in the biography. So I'm going to actually read the biography verbatim, and we'll chat after that. Blain Henshaw is an award-winning journalist, broadcaster, auctioneer, songwriter, and performer. Born and raised in Nova Scotia, he has written for newspapers and magazines and was producer and writer for several television documentaries while employed with the Atlantic television system, now CTV Atlantic. He now lives in Halifax and is a broadcaster at Seaside FM, community radio in Eastern Passage, and his first book was All Hands Lost in his first book, or is his first book. See, I can't read either. So did you write that, or did you just...
I might have. You get requests for bios for different things,
Right.
and some of them you have to kind of tailor to the event. The information in that sounds familiar. I can't remember if I wrote it for a specific event or not.
It's actually for the bio for where your books are set up online.
Okay, all right.
So.
Yeah, it would have been written for Pottersfield Press,
Yeah,
publisher of the book.
Right.
Yeah.
So I guess now
It's
we
all
can...
true.
It's all true, absolutely. Nothing's made up there.
Nothing, no.
So I guess now we can add author to that long list of accomplishments as well.
Yeah. I have another book coming out in September, a book about the Moose River Gold Mine cave-in.
I noticed I was going to ask you about that.
1936, yeah.
So that's why it said stock's not available yet, because you haven't written it, or it hasn't been published yet.
Right.
So not that you're sold out of it.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, it'll be should be released in September. It's being edited right now.
Nice. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Looking forward to that.
Yeah.
Nice. So I guess my next question is kind of, you just answered it, because I couldn't find really a lot of information on the second book.
On the Moose River book, yeah.
So I wasn't sure.
Yeah, that's
how
because
that
of the
works.
way the publishing industry works.
Okay.
Publishing goes by seasons, fall and spring.
Right.
And the publishers like to get their catalog out for each season well in advance. Like the fall catalog is kind of aimed at the Christmas market.
Absolutely.
So they want material from the writer as early as possible, because they don't have to tell the whole story, just enough to describe it.
Exactly.
So they put together, they do the graphics, they do a book cover, and they take a summary of the book from the author, and that goes in the catalog for the fall. And while that's being circulated, the books are usually being actually printed.
Nice. Yeah.
Yeah.
So the job's all done, the check's in.
Right.
Now you're partying and
Yeah.
hoping for a lot of sales, right?
Yes.
Exactly.
Yep. Surely. Yep.
In keeping with your background in journalism, both of these works are, of course, nonfiction. And as a writer wannabe, I know that the writing takes time, and if you lack the passion for the subject matter, the manuscript is likely to stay a manuscript. Is that pretty much
it.
correct?
Yeah, you have to believe in the project. You have to have a lot of enthusiasm for it, and you have to make energy for it and make time for it.
Absolutely.
But, you know, a lot of people say, oh my, how do you write a book? Well, I've written 5 books. I've only had 1 published. There's a lot of rejection in writing, and if you're a would-be writer watching or listening to this, don't be discouraged by rejection. You know, rejection doesn't necessarily mean that you've written something badly or poorly. It might mean that the market is not right for that subject at that time.
True.
It might mean that that publisher doesn't publish that type of book.
Yeah.
It could mean a whole lot of things.
Absolutely.
It might mean that the writing isn't good, so you got to do it over again.
Yeah.
And basically, you have to have thick skin and broad shoulders. I always say, if you can't handle criticism, better not get into the writing business, whether it's writing songs or books.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that reminds me of, my mind's blanking here, but you're going to have to help me in this. But how many times the lady in England with my mind just blanks, not Lord of the Rings. What am I thinking of?
I didn't read any of those books, but I know what you're talking about.
Anyway, she went through.
Yeah, Rawlings, the Harry Potter stuff.
J.K. Rowling.
Right.
Yeah, but she went through massive rejection.
Right, and there are lots of stories like that in the publishing industry where people have written long and hard and been rejected. And I've been rejected by the best publishers in Canada, some of the earlier pieces that I wrote. But there is one book that I wrote in 1981 that I still believe in, and I think that one day I will get it published, and I think it probably will be within the next couple of years. Because sometimes what it takes is to get another book published, and it gets out there, and then you develop a readership, and then they want to know, what else have you written?
Absolutely.
And that's the hope I have for the book that I wrote in 1981, because I still believe it's a good story.
Absolutely.
It's a strong story, it's a true story, it's a true crime story, and I still believe that at some point it will be published. So what I'm saying is, don't give up.
No, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, now I'm too busy to write, but that's another issue altogether. That's for another day, right?
Yeah.
So, in keeping with the two books that are on tap for the moment, what was your passion for maybe those books? Because they sound kind of similar in a lot of ways.
They're both stories of tragedies. The first book, All Hands Lost, I have to credit my mother for giving me books, really, because All Hands Lost is a story about a gypsum boat that sank in a bad storm in the Bay of Fundy in 1946, or 47 rather. And I learned about that from my mom when I was about 5 years old. I learned the essence of it, but I didn't know the name of the ship, didn't know the names of any of the crew on board that perished in that tragedy. But it's something that haunted me all my life. And when the book was launched in the spring of 2016, somebody asked me, how long did it take you to write that book? I said 65 years.
Absolutely.
It didn't take me 65 years, but it was in my head that I should do it, and bits and pieces of it were there. And finally, in 2015, I had the opportunity and the time to get it all together as a book.
Absolutely.
Now, the one that's not yet published, on the Moose River Gold Mine Cave-In and Rescue, it's not quite as tragic. It's an historic story because it took place in 1936, and people being trapped in any kind of mine, it always is of interest to the public. Everybody hopes for a successful rescue, and that's what happened at Moose River in 1936. However, there was another part of that story that has been told to some extent, but never to the extent that it should have been, and that's what I tried to do with it. The second part of the story is the pioneering work that J. Frank Willis, a Halifax broadcaster at the time, it's about the pioneering work that he did. He was the first man in the world in broadcasting to do live on-the-spot news reporting from the site of a news event. So it allowed me the opportunity to do more research on Frank Willis, the broadcaster, and he was a pioneer in a whole lot of ways in broadcasting. So the book is really two stories in one. It's the story of the cave-in and the rescue, and it's also the story of Canadian broadcasting and world broadcasting. It's a bit of a history of Canadian broadcasting.
And that's your sub-passion.
Yes.
For the whole.
Right, because I am a broadcaster.
Yeah.
Have been for a long time. So, and again, that story came to me from my mom. When I was a kid, we were listening to CBC one day, and Frank Willis was on the air. I was about 10, and I was interested in broadcasting at that young age, and was listening closely to the radio. And my mother said, "I know that guy." She said she had met him when she lived in Halifax back in the 30s. And that's when she told me a little bit about the Moose River Cave-In and how that was the event that had made Frank Willis quite famous.
Nice.
So that stayed with me a long time.
Yeah.
And it turned into a book.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So one of the back to the All Hands Lost book. It sounds like the song actually was first.
The song was first.
Yeah, because I couldn't get a release date on that, but I saw you do it, perform it live on YouTube in 2014, so
Okay.
I knew it pretty much had to be before. Just
Yeah.
the way I think, right?
Right, that song had been in my mind to write that and a couple of lines about it, even though I didn't know much about it.
Right.
But I did some research, and I was down in the Annapolis Valley one day visiting with a friend's mom. She brought out some scrapbooks that she had collected over the years of news events, and she had about 10 of them. She thought I might be interested in them for an auction. So I took a look at them, and they were quite nicely indexed, but I didn't have the time to look at all of them that day. So I chose 1945 to 1950. She had them in 5-year periods. And I looked in that time frame because I was born in 46, so I thought, well, I'll look through my birth year. And lo and behold, when I was going through this wonderful scrapbook, about halfway through, I found a big spread of newspaper clippings on the sinking of the Novadoc. And that's when I first learned the name of that ship, and it gave me the material I needed to do two things: to write the song, and also to write a commemorative article for the Halifax Herald.
Right.
When the article was published in the Herald, this was about a year after the song had been written and recorded, a couple of ladies, older ladies, got in touch with me through the Halifax Herald, and they had had brothers on the ship. And when I talked to those two ladies, that's when I knew I had to write the book, because they had amazing stories to tell.
Absolutely.
And I won't tell you their stories because I want you to buy the book.
Absolutely. What else for? Just tell us. Maybe they'll listen here instead of buying the book.
Well, essentially what the ladies told me was that they were glad I had written the commemorative story, because at the time there wasn't a lot of coverage of it. It was just after the war. A lot of ships were sinking, so it was just another ship that sank. But these were real live people that worked on that ship. And it's an accident that probably shouldn't have happened, but it did. The ship was not in great shape. And they told me that they were not treated very well by either the gypsum company or the shipping company after the tragedy. They were not treated well at all.
Yeah.
And the stories that they told me were sad. There were 24 people on that ship, and I was able to contact 19 either relatives or friends of the 24.
Yeah,
So it
that's
made,
really-
and it's their story.
Yeah.
They told me their story, and that's what the book is about.
It's kind of amazing how many accidents really could have been avoided. Like the friend we were just talking about who's in radio, when she's doing a traffic report, she never uses the word accident, or almost never. She always uses the word crash, because at most times,
Yeah.
all avoidable.
Yeah.
Music is huge for me. In fact, I got my first guitar at the age of 6 to 8, somewhere in there. And truth be told, I really didn't learn how to play it till 20-something.
I'm still learning.
And I was going to say, some people still say that I'm
Yeah.
still learning and not very good. But anyway, in a similar vein, I know that music is huge in your life as well. Now, I know we talked a lot about this off air, but now I need to repeat it. So we should have just recorded this in the restaurant, right? who or what, were your basic, or were your, let me try that in English here, one more time. I'm not even going to do a cut, you see. I'm very fluent with the audience, and I can just keep it going, right? Anyway, who were your basic influences in your music? What, your background, where you started, that kind of thing?
I can name about 5 who were strong influences. Like every kid in Nova Scotia who ever picked up a guitar, say in the 50s or 60s, whether they were aware of it or not at the time, was influenced by Hank Snow and Wilf Carter.
Absolutely. Yeah.
They were 2 big Nova Scotia names of people who made it in the music industry, and everybody knew that, whether you were fans of theirs or not. So I have to say that I was influenced by Hank and Wilf. As a matter of fact, this September I'm being inducted into the Country Music Hall of Fame, and I have written a special song for that occasion, which is a thank you to Hank and Wilf.
Wow.
Now, after that, I was heavily influenced by the folk music renaissance and the revival of the 60s. And during that is when I became, when I got to know the music of Gordon Lightfoot. And when I lived in Toronto for about 3 years, I used to go and hear him sing a couple of nights a week at Steele's Tavern or at the Riverboat Coffee House. And his music, his lyrics, heavily influenced my own writing. Not that I copy that, you can't. You've got to write your own style. But he was a great influence. Gene McClellan was not only an influence, but although he wasn't a friend of mine, I did meet Gene 2 or 3 times, and he encouraged me and listened to my songs and encouraged me to keep writing. And in fact, he put me in touch with my first publisher in music, which was a big deal. And Ian Tyson, I think Ian Tyson is the best songwriter that this country ever produced. And I've been heavily influenced by his music. Met him a couple of times, did one show with him in the 70s, in the mid-70s. Had met him in 1966 when he and Sylvia were still together at the Fisheries Exhibition in Lunenburg, and had done an interview with him there. So I've been familiar with their work and his writing for a long time, and it's influenced a lot. But there are other writers, American writers, country writers like Harlan Howard. He wrote tremendous songs, and I've tried to emulate good writers, try to bring my music to the standards they set, which is hard.
Absolutely.
Because these are all great writers
Yeah.
that I've talked about. But I think if you're going to write, if I was giving anybody advice, be influenced by good writers,
Yeah.
and that will make your own writing better.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. For years, I've been enjoying your programming. I guess it's only been 4 years since you've been on Seaside.
Yeah.
Which seems like longer for some reason.
Seems like longer
probably
to
for
me
you
too. Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Exactly.
It's a great place to work.
Absolutely. I hear the pay is great too.
Yeah, it's a volunteer job, but I love it. Yeah.
So, like I said, I've listened to and I love your music. I'm sure that this, like you do have a way with words. I'm sure that this is due to your journalism background and writing background and so on. Here at KRN, we love to support homegrown artists, and it actually helps if they are good. But it's not necessarily a prerequisite, but
Yeah.
in your case you are good, so that's even good. That's even better. So we're certainly thrilled to be supporting you on our station. So I think this is kind of just, you already answered what I have coming up here, so I don't. Yeah, so I think I'm basically, how's that for being professional? I think I'm basically done. We're done here. We're
Okay.
done good.
Yeah. Yeah.
But no, it's been a pleasure to meet you in all seriousness, and I think we're going to remain friends and lifelong friends and friends forever and all that nice stuff.
Yeah.
But no, your accomplishments are remarkable, and congratulations on your appointment as well that's coming up.
Thank you. Yeah, you mentioned about writing influences and my background in journalism. I started writing when I was pretty young. I had my own penny newspaper when I was in grade 3.
Wow.
Whatever age that is, probably around 8 or 10.
Yeah.
And I did a penny newspaper at school.
Yeah.
And did that for, I think, probably about a year.
Yeah.
And in high school, I was always writing for the high school yearbook and that kind of thing. And my mother was a writer. She wrote what they call bush notes for local papers.
Oh, okay.
And that would be like Mr. and Mrs. So-and-so visited Mr. and so-and-so on the weekend.
Exactly.
That kind of stuff. But she also wrote some journalistic material. She was interested in ships. She was born and raised down in Weymouth, and she remembers, or did remember, she's gone now, but she remembered some of the sailing ships, and she wrote about stuff like that. So, and I mentioned earlier in this interview about my mother influencing the books, or kind of planting the seed.
Absolutely.
And I owe her a lot, because she always encouraged me to write, even when I was doing the penny newspaper.
Nice.
And I've got her writings. She, right up until the year of her death, she was trying to get a book published, and I have all of her material, and one of my bucket list projects is to take her material, refine it, put it together, and put her name with mine,
Absolutely.
and
Kind of like
she'll be published.
Kind of like a Helen Creighton
Yeah,
kind of an idea.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
yeah. So thank you for the
Thank
time.
you.
I appreciate it.
No, it's
Really
great,
do.
and I'm glad. I'm thrilled to be working with you in your music as well, because
Good.
you're amazing. So I'm glad
Okay, thank
glad
you.
to have you here.
Yeah.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.